Hello and welcome from Santiago, Chile to this episode of Crossing Borders with Nathan Lustig, where Nate has conversations with entrepreneurs doing business across borders and the people who support them, with a focus on those with some connection to Latin America. My name is Sophia Wood, and I am a principal at Magma Partners and the co-founder of LATAM List, and today I have the honor of doing a guest intro for the podcast. LATAM List is proud to sponsor the Crossing Borders podcast as it helps share the stories of entrepreneurs and investors doing business in Latin America. Sign up for our weekly updates on latamlist.com to get a summary of the week's biggest headlines in Latin American tech news. Nate's guest today is Simón Chamorro, co-founder and CEO of Valiu, a Venezuelan remittance company that is using cryptocurrency to streamline remittance payments from Colombia to Venezuela during the economic crisis. They discuss how Valiu is using cryptocurrency to solve real-life problems and how it has the potential to combat inflation in economies across Latin America. Now living in Colombia, Simón also discusses the important lessons he has learned working with 4 startups in the Colombian ecosystem, his own experience starting a company, and where Valiu is headed next. We hope you enjoy Nate's conversation with Simón Chamorro.
Hey, Simón, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being willing to do it.
Thanks for the invitation, Nathan. How are you?
Doing well. I'm glad you could make it. I'm glad we could do it. So where are you in the world today?
Right now, I'm in my office in Bogota, Colombia. This is where I am right now.
Awesome. And what are you working on? What's Valiu?
So Valiu is a remittance company, which is international money transfers. And we're focused in South America because since 2016, Venezuela, which is a country going under economical crisis, the lower class of Venezuela started migrating through other countries in South America. So for the first time in history, we're seeing a huge remittance market inside of Latin America, because historically, the money was actually being sent from developed countries such as the United States or Europe to South America. But now this opportunity has come to arise, and Venezuelans are spread throughout all of Latin America and sending a lot of money to support their families back home. And so we're helping these people send money to their families in a closed economy. And so we're doing this through the use of crypto as a medium of exchange. We simply trade crypto locally in the country of origin and in the country of destination to complete fiat to fiat transfer. Fiat money is basically a government-backed currency. So remittance money always has to be fiat. We just use crypto on the back end, like I was saying, as a medium of exchange. But it works really great because it's actually quite fast, safe, and cheap.
And so jumping into your story a little bit, which kind of coincides a little bit with the business, where are you from originally?
So I'm actually from Venezuela. I was born there.
In what city?
In Caracas, in the capital. And I really love the country. It's a beautiful place. Geographically, Venezuela is a very lucky piece of land in the world. But since Chavez, I was very young when Chavez took presidency, and my family was always against that. So we always, like, my mom and my dad actually taught me all of this politics from a very young age. Politics was the daily conversation in my family, in my house. And since I was very young, I started to really understand all of these economical and political concepts and started to look for opportunities outside of Venezuela. So when I was 13, I actually had the opportunity to go play soccer professionally in Spain for 2 years. I quit soccer because I realized some of the kids were actually going to make it to first division. And you can definitely see that from a very young age. I was definitely not in that group. And so I took the quick decision at an early age to quit soccer, go back to Venezuela, graduated high school there. At the time, it was already really bad. And when I was in graduating high school, but I mean, you could still live, find food and stuff like that. And I got a scholarship to go do industrial design in Savannah, Georgia, in the United States, in a university called Savannah College of Art and Design. And yeah, Savannah for me was the perfect combination. Industrial design as a career was the perfect combination of the artistic part that I had since I was very young, mathematics and physics. But to my surprise, because I was good for math and physics when I was younger, But to my surprise, when you get into industrial design, you don't really learn much about mechanical engineer, about math, and it becomes a really artistic career. But I always wanted to do industrial design because of my entrepreneurial kind of mindset of creating things, designing things, building things. And while I was in industrial design, since I saw that maybe product design was not my thing, I took a class called service design, which changed my life, which is designing services and specifically designing apps, designing websites, understanding the users. And I really fell in love with that. And after I graduated, I got my first job in a tech company Co-Builder in Miami as a user experience researcher. And that's a little bit of like my story being born in Venezuela and my path towards entering the tech industry, basically, which I was lucky that it was my first job.
So when you started working in tech, what were some of the things that you started doing, and what were some of the companies you worked at before starting your own company?
Yeah. So the first company that I worked for is called Rocker Labs. It's a company based out of Miami with a subsidiary in Colombia where they have like a software factory. And Rocker Labs is a company Co-Builder. They help entrepreneurs that have a lot of experience in different markets to really understand how to start a company in tech, hire developers, hire designers, things that may become natural to some people, but to most entrepreneurs, there's always this barrier to develop a tech product. All of these, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that have a lot of knowledge in an industry in a specific problem, and Rocker Labs basically helps those people. So I worked at Rocker Labs, and I was working for many different startups at the same time as a UX person. But I always found sales to be a passion of mine and something that I was not necessarily good at. I was very interested. So I was like pushing. First of all, I was the first one to come into the office, the last one to leave the office. So I was showing the founders of the company that I was like very dedicated, right? And I also realized when I first got into the company that I was so far behind all of these really smart entrepreneurs that I just started reading a lot and showing this interest to the founders. So I started pushing the founders of that company to get me into sales meetings and stuff. And little by little, they started getting me into sales meetings, and they started to see that I actually had like a talent for this. And 4 months after I got into Rocker Labs, they gave me like an analyst, like a startup analyst job, like a role, which is a little bit of sales. And 8 months after that, I got a role in business development. And when I got the role in business development, I was moved to Colombia. So I after you graduate in the United States, you have 1 year of legal work permit or an extension of a visa called the OPT. So after my 1 year work in the US, since my mom is Colombian and I have the Colombian citizenship, this company sent me to Colombia to do business development here, meet with local investment funds, meet with local entrepreneurs, government organizations that are helping entrepreneurship. And at the time, that really didn't take off because the ecosystem in Colombia was quite young. That was in 2015. And so the business model that Rocker Labs had in the United States, not necessarily worked here, but they had a software factory here. And so since it didn't work, they switched me to work for one of the startups that they incubated called AdMobilize. And AdMobilize is a computer vision company that does hardware for measuring demographics on outdoor advertising in digital out of home. It's called DOOH, or out of home media. So billboards, bus stations, bus stops that have this kind of like ads that are digital. And so this hardware would actually measure the people in front of those ads. So if it was a billboard, it would measure the cars. At what speed were cars passing by, how many cars, what type of brand are those cars. And so ad publishers could actually start not only charging accurately for the ad, but also if cars were going slow in the highway, they can show ads with text. But if cars are going high at a high speed and there's no traffic, it's better to show ads with images. In bus stops, the same thing. So if there's a woman waiting in the bus stop, show her an ad of something that a woman would buy. And if it's a couple, show them couple products. And so that's AdMobilize. They have grown a lot more since then, but I worked for them for a while. And after that, I joined Lifted, which is probably the place that I learned the most about entrepreneurship from Brian York, the actual CEO. He was coming from Silicon Valley with a lot of experience, and he gave me a call, wanted to hire me as the head of sales for the company. And I worked with Lifted for 2 years. Lifted basically is an Uber for trucks in Latin America. So last mile deliveries with trucks, they're doing really well. Now they're in Mexico, Brazil, Colombia, Peru, Ecuador. They're basically in all of Latin America and growing really fast. And last but not least, I joined Cheaper after Lifted. I joined Cheaper, which is another another fast-growing startup here in Colombia. Before I moved on to Valiu. So Valiu was always, I'll tell you a little bit of the story, but it was always kind of like a side project that I had with my co-founder, that we were working on the weekends, on crypto stuff, on the nights, whenever we had time. And finally, we came up with Valiu, which is sending money internationally using crypto, which met both of the criteria that we wanted for our startup, which is do something with crypto and solve true problems, solve a real world problem. And it actually took us more than a year to find that, because most of the crypto companies that are today are exchanges.
So going back to your experience on working at two of the faster growing startups in the region with Cheaper and Lifted. And if people want to hear Brian's story, there's a previous episode of the podcast which we'll link in the show notes. But a lot of people come and say, "Hey, how can I get into tech?" Or "I'm thinking of starting a business." And our advice a lot of times is work for a startup for at least a year or two and see what you can learn. What are some of the top 2 or 3 things you learned working at Lifted and Cheaper?
Yeah, so the first thing is get really close to the founders. Don't expect anything back. Work as a founder, take it as make it yourself. Don't expect that if you work late hours on the weekends, you're gonna get anything back. Just be there with them. So founders usually work on the weekends, work on very late until the night. And for me, it was really good because Felipe and Angel, which are the other 2 founders, we would stay every day, put some like strong music after everybody left the office at 6-7 p.m. And we would stay there until 10 p.m., 11 p.m. working. And I was actually living with one of the co-founders. I had an extra apartment in my office, so I really got close to them. And that's the one thing I would really recommend if people are working for startups. And definitely that for me is the first thing. Get a mentor. Basically, it's find a mentor. And for me, in terms of being a CEO, it was definitely Brian. How to raise money, how to control emotions. For example, really Brian is like a rock. Nothing really moves his needle. And that's really important when you start a company, because if you let emotions control you, it really is exhausting. So that would be kind of like my first tip. Don't expect anything back and become close to the founders. The second thing would be understand your position. I think one of the things that maybe, I don't know if it was a mistake of mine, but I was so excited with the company that I just wanted to do a little bit of everything. If I saw a problem that needed to be fixed, I would go there, right? And I would try to fix it and kind of jump on top of other people and things like that, because I kind of let myself go. So another thing that I would definitely recommend for founders is get close to the founders, but understand what are your limits and what are you there to do, and do that really well. And if you do that really well, then okay, you can help on the rest. But that's kind of the other thing I would definitely recommend. Yeah.
So thinking about value business and wanting to do something in crypto, I personally think that either Venezuelan people who've left Venezuela or Argentines staying in Argentina are some of the most likely people to build real businesses using crypto in the world, because smart, educated people and a need for it. What made you choose crypto, and what are some of the things you're most excited about with using crypto on the back end to solve a real world problem?
Yeah, and so totally agree. So Venezuela and Argentina are both countries that were very rich. We had really good education. So most Venezuelan migrants are actually high educated people. And now going through those situations, which is mainly inflation, it basically takes value out of the local currency, out of the fiat currency of those countries, and people start to look to alternatives. And in these countries, there's capital controls, specifically in Venezuela. In Argentina, not that much, but since there's capital controls, it's hard to find dollars or any other type of fiat currency. So the only thing out there is, or either you buy things that like gold or food for the lower class that you can maintain value, or crypto. and crypto is kind of like the easy thing to do for most people. So these economies are definitely they're getting very, I would say, they're very prone to becoming maybe the first crypto economies in the world, I hope. And going back to your question, you mentioned what got me into crypto. So basically, in my first job in Rocker Labs, that's actually where I met my first co-founder. He actually worked for the same company, David. And David he was working on another project, but I got into a secret project from the founders, which is in 2014, Ethereum was just coming out. Before then, it was like Bitcoin and a few other cryptos, but we didn't have the concept of smart contracts. So when this came out, we were assigned to like a secret project with the founders of building like a Facebook for building companies, where you could create this whole thing on blockchain, and you could meet founders. So if you're like a CEO and you're looking for a CTO in the same city, you can match people. You can even like create your company there and give out tiny fractions of shares in smart contracts to designers, maybe, that if you need a logo or like a design of your website and you don't have money, you can give tiny fractions of your company to a designer as a medium of payment through smart contracts. We built this whole idea of like even an IPO inside of the same platform, companies that could do IPOs. And so I really fell in love with the technology since then. I never was actually a hodler or a trader, really never had that much time actually to do it. But I was always kind of studying the technology, reading the news about it. And that's kind of like where my passion comes from. And David is very similar. David built a crypto ATM company in Florida and in Maryland. And he's been doing cybersecurity and blockchain for a very long time. And that's kind of like our passion for this. So when Valiu came to mind and the solution came to mind, we little by little, since the moment we started doing international money transfers using crypto, little by little, we have actually been constructing our story and our vision for the company, which is helping transition the Venezuelan economy or the Argentinian economy, even the developing countries into economies that are safer, that are built on blockchain, built on crypto. And we're still a little bit far away from that, but we think that we are on the right time and at the right place specifically, which is Venezuela.
And what kind of a like, give me a use case for the person that somebody's in Colombia and they want to send money to Mexico. What does somebody do to use the system? Do they have to understand crypto at all?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So as an industrial designer and doing UX, the first thing that I noticed is that most crypto and blockchain companies promote the usage, like the crypto aspect of them in their websites and all of that. And for us, we actually don't talk about crypto at all in our website. Crypto is just the technology we use in the backend to complete international money transfers fast and cheap, right? But our users are people that are unluckily have low technical literacy, low financial literacy, and so in a way we're also in the business of educating a lot of people financially. So you cannot talk crypto to our users. So the way it works is very simple. You download an app. So our users are Venezuelan migrants in Colombia that are already generating some income. A lot of them work for companies such as Rappi, the gig economy, right? Such as Uber. They already have a smartphone and they have family in Venezuela that they need to support. Because Venezuela right now, I didn't mention this, but 20% of the population left, but 80% of the population that lives in Venezuela is completely dependent on remittance money as of today. And so these people that are here in Colombia working in the gig economy need to send money to their families. So they download our app. They simply have to add their family's bank account in Venezuela, input how much Colombian pesos they're going to send. They can immediately see how much bolivars, which is the local currency in Venezuela, their family will receive. And they can go pay in cash or in debit. So we have debit payments or cash payments. If they want to pay in cash, we already have 20,000 cash payment locations in Colombia, which basically we are in every block of Colombia. Very convenient for most of these people that earn in cash. And that's it. Once they make the payment, in an hour, their family has their money in their bank accounts. And so in Venezuela, just a quick parenthesis, everybody has a bank account because of hyperinflation. Like I was mentioning, the money loses value on a daily basis. So that means that cash is worthless. So that basically pushed the whole population to get bank accounts. Doesn't necessarily mean that helps with hyperinflation. You still lose money on a daily basis, but now you can pay with a card, right? You don't have to carry bags and bags of cash to pay for a piece of bread or some eggs. So that's pretty much how it works. It's very simple. It's an app where you add your family's contact, you say how much money you want to send, and you can pay cash or debit, and in 1 hour their family has their money.
How do you see this expanding across the region? What are your next steps to building it into the go-to business, not just for Venezuelans, but other people in the region that want to exchange money across regions?
So we're actually targeting the Venezuelan diaspora. The next countries that we're looking into are Peru, Chile, Ecuador, and Chile in that same order, because those are the countries with most Venezuelan migration. And we're really targeting this diaspora because in South America, this is a hugely unattended market. The only way to send money to Venezuela, so quick parenthesis, there's no Western Union, there's no MoneyGram, there's no Swift bank transfer. And even if the Swift work, it's $30 and our users send $20. So this is more than 100% of what they would actually send. So the only solution to send money to Venezuela is through a black market, informal market of people that have bolivars in Venezuela and that resell them. I'm not going to get into the details, but it's a chain of intermediaries and it's illegal basically. And a lot of people get scammed. So since it's a very unattended market, we're actually targeting this diaspora, focusing on them initially. And what we say is that we're connecting Latin America through the Venezuelan diaspora, because this is the first time that we have an internal migration such as the Venezuelan migration. And now Venezuelans that are in Peru need to send money to their families in Colombia because you have families that are spread throughout Latin America already. So that's kind of the users that we're targeting. The next stage of the company is actually allowing people to save money on the Valiu app. So we will basically transform our application into a savings account, which people will actually be saving on stable coins, on stable cryptocurrencies, which are pegged to the US dollar. That means that families in Venezuela or anywhere in Latin America can actually start saving money on dollars. And this is quite important because this will help or eliminate the hyperinflation. It will fight hyperinflation in countries such as Venezuela, or fight inflation in countries such as Argentina, which had 50% inflation in the past couple of months. Even Colombia, in the past couple of months, our currency devaluated 16%. So the dollar is the ultimate store of value outside of the US, specifically in Latin America, and we want to allow people to save money on dollars. And so we're using remittances as the perfect vehicle to acquire users initially and then allow them to save money on dollars. And then it becomes almost like an international Venmo. As long as somebody has the Valiu app, they can send these dollars anywhere. Doesn't matter if they're in Peru, Chile, or Ecuador. And if they want to withdraw that money to the local currency, then we also have the off ramps, which is what it's called, to convert it to the local currency. So we tell a lot of people that we're planning to become the combination of Western Union with Venmo in a way, right?
So thinking about your time going through Y Combinator, what were the top 1 or 2 lessons you learned from the program?
Yeah, so as an international founder, as a Latin founder, one of the first things that you learn is how to talk. And Americans really are good at this, like talk and speak directly, and like don't use jargon. Like a lot of the times to Latin American founders, we fall into the trap that we kind of over explain things and we make things more complex. So as an international founder, you really learn and you practice a lot how to speak directly, how to tell things simply, and eliminate jargon out of your vocabulary and out of your writing. So that's definitely one of the key things that I learned, even like putting their partners into context, because they have context on the US market, and a lot of the times they're learning about all of these huge markets outside of the US. So if you're going to do office hours with them or like talk directly with them about a problem you have and get their feedback, you need to put them into context in 10 seconds. And if you cannot do that, then the whole conversation loses focus. So that's one of the main things that I learned. The other thing that you learn in Y Combinator is definitely you learn. I was lucky to be, hand by hand with Brian York, the CEO of Lifted, and I learned a lot about fundraising. But in YC, you learn about fundraising, in Silicon Valley, which there's a few differences there as well. And I would say that the third thing for me personally, this is pretty basic, everybody should do this, but is how to deconstruct your projections from how to get to $1 billion in valuation, and then deconstruct back from top down, top bottom. And that really helps you understand what you need to do and what metrics you need to hit on a monthly and a quarterly basis.
What books, blogs, podcasts, documentaries do you like to recommend to people?
Ooh, this is a huge list. It really depends, right?
It could just be a couple of them. They don't have to do all of them.
Yeah. Let me see. This is a weird one, but there's this book that made me learn a lot about how to manage and lead a sales team called Predictable Revenue. I would call it the sales manager Bible. It's really cool if people are managing B2B sales teams, and it's kind of really specific, actionable. Apart from that, there's many books that I really like. Good to Great, Blitz Scaling, all of these books that are becoming really, really popular. But I want to think about very specific books out there. So yeah, that's definitely one because of my experience doing sales. I think it's really important. Another one that I really liked is for some people that are getting into startups. This is a lifestyle at the end, right? And you have to live a healthy lifestyle because there's so much work, and you need to actually prioritize, for example, things like exercise, things like sleep. A lot of the time, founders get deprived of sleep, and by their own decision. In Steel and Fire, they talk about how CEOs in Silicon Valley and Navy SEALs find flow and find basically this. How do they get in the zone constantly and repeatedly? And so I really enjoyed that book as well.
And what's next for you in the business?
For us, the next step is what we're doing today. It's building a product we call Valiu Market. Valiu Market is basically our infrastructure it's a marketplace of OTCs, or over the counters. This is a little bit more technical for people outside of fintech, but this will basically, in a simple way, allow us to, wherever there's an OTC in our marketplace, we can send money from or send money to that place. So once we launch that product, we will definitely be able to offer this to anybody outside of Venezuela, the Venezuelan population in South America, because South America is our focus, and we'll build this marketplace. So that's the next thing for the company.
Well, it's going to be fun to see you building out a real use case for crypto across LATAM. Hope that it's successful. It's going to be fun to watch. Thanks for taking the time to be on the podcast.
Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you again for listening to this episode of Crossing Borders with our guest, Simon Chamorro. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share with a friend and give us a rating on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's the best way to share what's going on in Latin America's tech ecosystem.